I love to start off with sharing some of the artists that inspire me, or some artwork and colors and things that I see out in the world that really influence my work. One artist and designer who I really admire is Emory Douglas. He was the graphic designer, the official graphic designer for the Black Panthers. And I recently got to see him speak and was able to buy some of his prints. So this is a print that he was selling. I don't know too much of the history behind it, but I just love the flatness of this illustration. And one thing that you'll see in my work that I've picked up from him is he always tries to show his characters as, I would say, activists in some way. At least that's my interpretation of it, but he always has like a button or something on his figures. And I've incorporated that into my work, which you'll see a little bit later. Another thing that I love about Emory Douglas is that he makes his figures look really powerful. And one way that he does that is with this kind of burst, which is a very old technique that has been done in illustration and graphic design for many years. So that's something that I see in his work that I always try to play with and kind of experiment with my own work. Another contemporary artist, this is from Angela Pilgrim. This is a little beat up, but I really love her work. She shows a lot of figures in different hairstyles, and again, that flatness that I like, so flat color, not very layered or anything. It's something that I'm really drawn to because you have these really solid colors, these solid shapes, and I love what she does with the figure, with the portraits. So I look to this as inspiration. I love texture, I love patterns, so seeing like how the polka dots are kind of layered in this print, and I don't know who the artist this is for this. This is something that I just found at a market and decided to pick it up because I love the colors and I love the textures and the patterns here, and thinking about how I might be able to incorporate this into my own work. I am a hoarder of magazines. I love magazines, and seeing how photographers capture an image or how colors are played into a work or things are layered. So this is something in this Dysfunction magazine. So you can see all the different patterns and colors. So I might look at this and say, you know what, I want to try pulling this palette into my own illustration. You could see how the colors are playing up here. It's really beautiful. So this is something I might cut out and put on a mood board, or might like photograph with my phone and have it as a reference for an illustration later. Some other random places that I might look to for color inspiration. This is a book from Micah, which is a school. This is a catalog slash it's like a reference for what they're doing at the school, and you could see that it's really beautifully designed, but then I'm really interested in just how the colors are being used, like this really pale kind of pinkish color with this dark blue. Not a palette that I would ever really think of, but it's like a palette that's already created, and I could just, pick it up in my own illustration. I don't have to do too much work. Like, look at this beautiful, this green and these kind of pastel-y colors and navy blue. So I might say, okay, I'm gonna bring that into one of my own drawings. I use Google Images, I use Pinterest, and they're really great resources for being inspired, really great stuff on there. But you can imagine that other people are looking at the same things. So I always encourage people to go to the library. I know it's old school, but it's a great way to see things or find things that other people may not see or find. Even if you can't make it to a library, if you can just go online to the Library of Congress and do a search, or a local library, they might have an archives online, and search for a topic or something of interest, you might be able to find some really archival images or inspiration that is unexpected and will inspire something that you didn't even think of.
I get inspired by everything around me. So that's in my environment, conversations, people. Ideas spark randomly for me. So sometimes I see something funny happening. Usually funny for me is an indicator that I want to draw it. And this can be anything, like something that I imagine, say my dog talking to me. My dog is, of course, one of my biggest muses. Anyone who has a dog will say that. But also things like my new baby, who also is funnily inspiring. And my husband, so when we started staying together, that was a whole different experience. And I loved drawing about that. One way to get inspired is, of course, going out. For me, I love going to bookstores and just going on the road. In India specifically, there's so many things to see. Nothing stays the same. The same road can look different in a week. And I think that was one of the things that inspired me the most. I remember when I just started, I was in Kerala, which is South India. And in South India, men wear this wraparound cloth called the mundu. So I was on a client trip, I was in the car. I remember seeing this guy wearing a long mundu and he did a little dance and suddenly it became a short mundu. And I was like, how the hell did that happen? I made a note, of course, and I went home and I remember Googling this and I saw this, you lift your leg and you can make it like into a half skirt and then tuck it in. And I thought it was amazing. So I drew about it. I remember putting it out on Facebook at that time. And it went super viral. It was my first time I've ever been viral, and it meant so much to me because I couldn't fathom so many people seeing my illustration. That's a really small incident of how you can see something that everyone sees every day and put it in as an illustration, but suddenly everyone relates to it. And I love that feeling, and that's my favorite part of my job, our favorite part of just drawing in general.
You might think that the place where you come from is the most boring place on earth and that there's nothing good about it, but I bet that every single place has a potential. For example, I was born in Reggio Emilia, which is a very small city in the north of Italy, and it's in a plain. So if you take a train for hours, all you're gonna see from the window is two stripes. One blue stripe for the sky and one stripe for the grass. So there's nothing really interesting about it, but I think that growing up around it, I sort of like had it in the back of my mind for so long, and that's probably the reason why, for example, when I draw landscapes, I use a very, two-dimensional sort of like way of telling about places. And also maybe that could be the reason why I love stripes so much. I always wear stripes, I always put stripes on my characters' clothes. Again, you might feel like your life is not as exciting, but if you just like look around, you'll see something that's special and that's yours. For example, when I was growing up, my mom had a lot of art books in the house, which were of course very useful, but when you're a kid, you're not really interested in art per se. So I would look at the book covers, and most of the time I would open the book and the book was totally boring for me. So I would just stare at the book covers. And I remember that my mom had this book about architecture. It was like fantastic architecture. And on the cover, it had this house that's basically a face. And I found out years and years later that it's actually a building by Niki de Sanfal. And I found it so interesting because this artist could take something that's a face with like big eyes and a big mouth with a tongue outside and turn it into an architecture. So I think that from all these things that I would look around and I would find in the house, so I never really thought they were special, I took little bits of them and turned them into something that's now my style.
So when you're thinking about where you want to go to find your inspiration, you might actually find that the most inspiring places are the places you're already going to every day, and you're just not looking hard enough, because inspiration is everywhere. You just have to notice it and you have to be looking out for it. All right, so let's go on into the park. Let's see who's here and start to look for some inspiration for our project. One of my favorite obstacles in this park is this circular mani pad right here. It's just like different. You don't normally see this in a skate park. The specific things I like about this object is the form of it. You know, the circular shape might work really well in the composition since it's so symmetrical. And I just really like the mass of it too. It's like very chunky and thick, and it evokes a lot of emotion when I see it. The next place that caught my eye for inspiration was this red brick building back here in the corner. So let's go check that out. So when I'm looking around these spaces, I'm always looking for interesting shapes, interesting geometry, and this water fountain really stood out to me. It's a really old school shape, something you don't normally see in parks anymore. I really like that curve that's on the bottom of the water fountain. I might try incorporating that into my illustration later. I definitely think some of my most interesting insights and compositions and illustrations come from just watching people, and not necessarily drawing people, but the little idiosyncrasies between how people interact and like our modern culture are really inspiring to me. So maybe just looking around where you are and focusing on what are the people like in your city, in your town, and how can you incorporate yourself into the community and take something away that you can bring into your art.
I constantly get inspired heavily by a lot of things that I see around. It might be just people, their facial expressions, their posture, how they do things very uniquely, and also by the environment. Things like light, the shadows that are cast by different trees and leaves. I would suggest that always stay on the lookout for things that might spontaneously click with you or stand out in a different way. Let me show you a few examples of my illustrations and tell you about how some observations spontaneously inspired them. A couple of years ago, Rucha and I traveled to the Andamans, and we went on this very special night kayak tour where we were going to see bioluminescent algae in the water. Now these algae are extremely tiny, they are very transient, and they have very light kind of a glow. Something that cannot be photographed at all with any kind of a camera. That was an amazing experience, and I had to bring it to my canvas, especially because it cannot be told in any other way. But then not all things are very obvious right away. So we have a lot of these plants at home in our balcony. And one such plant is the cotton plant. Now this might not be very scientifically accurate, but what I've observed is that there's always a leaf that pops up every time there's a cotton boll, kind of trying to protect it from the sun and the elements. So I felt that this is kind of too much like a person would take care of someone like their sibling or like their child. So that's what inspired me to draw this illustration where a leaf is taking care of the fresh new cotton boll, and the cotton boll is looking up in a very cute kind of a way, very affectionately at the leaf, kind of like what a child would look at his or her mom. So it is important to look at everyday things in different ways and think about them slightly more so that we can come to the unobvious parts of it. So when you're observing the world around you, look for things that are very specific to how people are doing things. Say you see some people who are sitting, first thing that will come up in our mind is like, okay, they're sitting. Now we need to ask ourselves, what are they feeling like? Everyone has a unique way of expressing physically how they're feeling. Someone might be feeling a bit sad. You can see that from their posture. Once you have this habit of looking at nuances, you'll start noticing these things more obviously as well.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our latest videos.